have a bunch of cars outside, Teslas.
jam-packed agenda, so I want to keep us on time. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm sorry for me nagging you to sit down. My name is Rebecca Wagner. I'll be your Julie McCoy for today, walking through each of the presentations. I understand you can't quite hear me in the back of the room. Is that better? No? All right, well, we'll continue to try and improve that. We also have overflow in some of the other rooms down here, as well as a room upstairs. There you go. There we go. And also, I wanted just to let you know that this is live streamed today, so I have to be on my best behavior and just keep in mind that anybody might be watching. Again, my name is Rebecca Wagner. I'm an energy policy consultant here in Reno. I focus on climate, energy policy, and transportation electrification. I'm also a member of the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, or SWEEP. I serve on the board with several others, and this is a nonprofit organization advancing energy efficiency and electrification in the Southwest. I'd like to take just 1 second for logistics. There's a restroom right near the front of where the entrance is, where we all came through. As I mentioned, we are jam-packed. It's obviously standing room only here. We have overflow areas. There will be photos and videographer around, so be mindful if you don't want your photo taken. Try to duck out of the way. And we are continuing to have our ride and drive out in the parking lot. And if you're interested in that, I think we'll have an opportunity to keep that going this morning. And we also have an RTC bus from RTC Washoe right out front. It's an electric bus, one of 17 that they have in their fleet. And you're welcome to go on board and check that out. We're really proud of that here in Reno. So I'd like to start with recognizing our sponsors. As I mentioned, SWEEP is our host, as well as an organization called Ceres. And I'd like to just acknowledge Tom Polikalis from SWEEP. He's been the logistical coordinator and pulled this together along with Emily Duff from Ceres. So I really appreciate all the hard work you all have done on that. Our other sponsors include NV Energy, University of Nevada, Reno Innovation Center, powered by Switch, the facility we're sitting in here today, the Governor's Office of Energy, the Peppermill, Western Resource Advocates, the Green Alliance, the National Wildlife Federation, Plug In America, RTC Washoe, Nevada EFX, and Nissan. So, as I mentioned, we have a pretty jam-packed agenda for today, and I'll do my best to keep us on track. This is a complicated subject, but it's very exciting. We're in I feel like our nascent stages of electrifying our transportation system. And we often think of transportation electrification as electric vehicles, Teslas, Priuses, Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Volt. But as you can see from our demonstration outside, there's scooters, motorcycles, bicycles, electric school buses, electric buses for transit. So it's a bigger picture, and we all have an opportunity to experience it in one way or another, but it is all part of the growing movement to transition us to electrified transportation. You'll hear today why that's important, both from a health and environmental benefit. There are significant economic benefits to this transition. You'll hear about legislation and public policy. And we'll hear a little bit about the updates on the VW settlement funds from our friends at Division of Environmental Protection. A couple of words on the consumer experience. And then we'll conclude today with remarks from Senator Brooks of Las Vegas. And he'll pull all of this together and help set the stage as we need to take the next steps at the Nevada legislature, which is starting on Monday. So with that, I'm going to introduce Director David Bobzien from the Governor's Office of Energy. Mr. Bobzien was appointed by Governor Steve Sisolak. Come on up, David. That's okay. Steve Sisolak to lead the Governor's Office of Energy about 2 weeks ago or so. Prior to this role, he served 4 years as the at-large council member on the Reno City Council, and because of his leadership on the council, Reno took strong steps towards increasing efficiency in building energy use and reducing the city's carbon emissions, including becoming the first city in Nevada to join the C40 Compact of Mayors and the first city in Nevada to adopt building energy efficiency benchmarking ordinance. It's all really nerdy things to say. There's a lot of work that Director Bobzien has done on the city level, which is really exciting and groundbreaking, especially for those of us who live in Reno. Prior to his time on the council, Mr. Bobzien served 4 terms as a legislator in the Nevada Assembly. That's where I worked with him for many years on energy policy issues. He worked on conservation and clean energy efforts. Mr. Bobzien received his bachelor's in government and politics from George Mason University and a master's of public administration with an emphasis on natural resources and public land policy from Boise State University. Please welcome Director Bobzien.
I'll just start by acknowledging that the BSU reference is always a little touch and go when I'm at a University of Nevada Reno facility, but so be it. Good morning. My name is David Bobzien, and I'm proud to serve as the Director of the Governor's Office of Energy. And on behalf of Governor Steve Sisolak, I want to welcome everyone to today's forum. It's exciting to see a packed room. We appreciate your patience. I know we've had to get a little bit creative with some of the seating arrangements, myself included, but we will make it through. I want to join with Rebecca in thanking our hosts and our sponsors, our conveners, the organizers. It's wonderful to have this network, this set of partnerships. And as you'll hear today, there are so many different items on the to-do list where these partnerships will become incredibly important. So as was mentioned, this is the end of my first 2 weeks on the job with the Governor's Office of Energy, and I'm on a bit of an endorphin high. I'm thrilled to be furthering Governor Sisolak's agenda for making Nevada a clean energy leader, as he said in his State of the State address just 2 weeks ago, not only to combat the effects of climate change, but for building green-collar jobs in Nevada. I also feel like I'm running a fast pace, but it's just the second mile of a marathon. I'm very grateful to have with me here today some members of the GOE team, and I'll ask them to stand. Mark Brady and John Fairman. You guys here? I saw you both come in. There you go. Who lead on our EV programs, as well as Laura Wickham and Robin Yoakum. If you guys can also say hi, and please applause for all of them. That is this is a large part of the GOE team that is here today. I place high value on the professionals of our office engaging and being force multipliers, if you will, in the work that we share on advancing clean energy in Nevada. So thank you, team, for your work. You might ask, what is the Governor's Office of Energy doing to promote the electrification of our state's transportation, an effort that is of clear importance for climate action in Nevada? Well, we'll start with the Nevada Electric Highway. Nevada has dedicated the full 15% of VW settlement funds, as Rebecca mentioned. We'll be hearing more about that from our partners at NDEP, $3.7 million, towards Category 9 light-duty EV infrastructure, and it has been actively building projects to better connect Nevada communities. The effort is building out the 5 major corridors in Nevada, I-80, I-15, US 95, US 93, and US 50, all by the end of 2020. To date, there are 7 active projects with another 17 in the development phase for a total project of around 38 sites. We're also engaged in what's known as Rev West, the Regional Electric Vehicle West Plan signed on to in 2017. That includes 8 Intermountain West states: Wyoming, Arizona, Colorado, Montana, New Mexico, Utah, and Idaho, including Nevada. The purpose is to allow EV drivers to seamlessly drive across the signatory states along the major transportation corridors. This is a group that meets monthly to collaborate and share ideas. Nevada is the co-chair of the group along with Colorado, and you'll start to notice a theme that we've got some emerging states that are leaders, and Nevada is in that peer group. You'll be hearing plenty more today about the Ecentricity Report, funded by our office, which is an analysis of Nevada's transportation system, and it identified an action plan for the public sector to help advance transportation electrification. You can get the report on our website. It is delightful, but it is also a pretty heavy document, so plan to spend some time going through all of it. It specifically outlines 16 recommendations for public agencies to consider. We have with us here in the front row, in fact, Lauren Rosenblatt and Marie Steele, and they'll be sharing more on the report later today. So we were happy to be the sponsor of that, and delightful work that we received in return. Our office is looking forward to the future. And by the future, I mean first today's proceedings, and I'm sure some provocative discussions on how Nevada can encourage more lower emitting vehicles, with the possibility for a potential goal such as a target for adoption and/or infrastructure, and how we can foster an environment here in Nevada in which transportation electrification can thrive. But we're also excited about the future after today, where GOE will engage with partners across the state in both this upcoming legislative session and beyond to address and hopefully solve many of the challenges we'll be discussing today. Going back to the Ecentricity Report real quick, and again, if you haven't spent time with it, you really need to. It is a dense, comprehensive overview of the technologies, players, and policy questions and options in front of us. What is very apparent after review, and Rebecca alluded to this just a few moments ago, is that the image of a plug-in car that the general public would have when they hear the term electrifying transportation is really just scratching the surface. And in a lot of ways, it's up to all of us to evangelize the complexity and the possibility and the excitement that this is so much more than just electric cars. The collision, that's a car joke, of our climate action imperative with the enormous technological innovation that's happening in autonomous systems, battery storage, and transportation infrastructure is nothing short of exciting. But to make the most of this moment and avoid unnecessary collisions, just do a web search on City of Reno Lime Bike, or better yet, City of Sparks Lime Bike. We have to learn new ways to partner, new ways to share information and perspectives. The private sector, particularly the startup world, has to learn and understand how difficult the legal and regulatory landscape can be, and perhaps more importantly, why it's there in the first place. The public sector, and I mean legislators, regulators, agency types like myself, and local electeds, have to learn about these technologies and how the ways things have been done in government in the past have to adapt to this change. So yes, we're looking forward to the future, and at the Governor's Office of Energy, we're excited for our role in the conversation and the fostering of the changes to come. Thank you, and I look forward to enjoying this day with you and the work ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Director. There's been so many female directors of the office that I want to say Madam Director, so sorry. Okay, now I'm trying to keep up with the slides. Here we go. Next, I would like to introduce Commissioner Ann Pongratz. She's a commissioner with the Nevada Public Utilities Commission. Probably one of the hardest but best jobs in state government, in my opinion. Ann has served as a commissioner since October of 2016. Prior to her appointment to the commission, Ms. Pongratz practiced regulatory and government relations law for over 30 years, focusing on regulation, competition, infrastructure development, interconnection, and pricing issues. Ms. Pongratz began her legal work on transportation issues for the Interstate Commerce Commission and Civil Aeronautics Board in Washington, D.C., and then representing transportation clients before the California Public Utilities Commission. She later went on to represent Sprint's competitive long-distance company and wireless telecommunications company before state and local governments throughout the western United States, and served as general counsel to Sprint's Las Vegas incumbent local utility, telecommunications utility. I'm trying really hard today to not do acronyms, so I won't jump to telecom. Telecommunications. Subsequently, Ms. Pongratz represented the Colorado River Commission of Nevada's electric service provider and the Governor's Office of Economic Development, where she negotiated incentive agreements with Tesla, Apple, and others. Ms. Pongratz has lived in Las Vegas since 1993, where she raised her children She earned a bachelor's cum laude in government from Harvard University and her JD from Temple University Law School. I'd love to welcome Commissioner Pongratz, and she will walk through a great presentation on that's very eye-opening even to me, who spends a lot of time on this topic. So welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So, good morning. I very much appreciate the opportunity to meet you and talk with you today. I'm a real devotee of EVs. I've been driving a small plug-in hybrid for about 5 years. I will tell you that I find just even driving the vehicle requires me to learn a lot that I didn't know before in all the years I've driven gas combustion engine vehicles. And that's part of the fun for me, all the learning. But being a user and kind of having to experience what you have to experience when you're using an EV these days, it helps you to understand where a lot of the gaps are, right? And it also helps you to understand some of the special, for me, wonderful things about driving an EV. You know, I get to track, okay, what's my average miles per gallon over the life of the vehicle? Oh, 87.3. Well, that's pretty cool. How many of us have had that experience? The electronics are fabulous. I was telling the fellows from NDEP, every so often a friend of mine says, you know, you should get into that dealer and just have them change the gas for you. It might get stale, right? You know, I've never been one to track my gas purchases. Now I track it because it's so fun to see how little I use. You know, if you can only buy $25 of gas a month and you're driving every place you need to drive in Vegas, because you do get to plug in at home and at work, and I'm fortunate to have a plug-in opportunity at work, it changes the way you think about things, and you really sense of how it can be a great benefit to society, even when you think about what if people who don't have money wouldn't have to spend money on gas to get to their jobs? Is there some way to get there to benefit those individuals? There's a lot of changes that I think we have ahead of us. I have to mention at the very beginning of this that my comments today are my comments only and do not represent the views or the policies of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. So let's get started. My talk today will focus on really on you and what do you want to get from transportation electrification, when do you want it, and what are you willing to do to get it? We did a little survey that some folks responded to get a sense for where this group of people are on EV issues. And so we'll talk about the survey results, look at challenges that we're facing presently, look at what are your goals for transportation electrification. We have a little cautionary tale from the past and the first time we tried EVs in the United States that did not succeed in the battle against the gas combustion engines. And then we'll talk about what do you need to do to really formulate an effective action plan. So what do you want for Nevada transportation electrification? Here's what our survey said about what you know and what you want. First question was, when were EVs first marketed in the United States? Well, this is a pretty technical group because a lot of you knew that the first time we had practically available EVs in this country was the turn of the prior century. They started being marketed even in the late 1800s, and by 1910, there were a number of practically available EVs in the marketplace. I was surprised. I didn't realize it had been that early. Second question, how many Nevadans drive EVs today, though? Again, it's a pretty technically astute group. The largest bar there was closest to the truth. Marie advises me that's actually a little low. We have in the fleet in Nevada today 4,280 EVs, or less. Unfortunately, that is less than 1% of the vehicles in the state. Next question, do you drive an EV? Do you own an EV? Okay, that's a very, very telling number, right? Even in this group, we have many more people who do not drive EVs than do. I want to focus on this because if we understand why many of us don't drive EVs yet. We will understand better how the opponents of the various actions that people here want to recommend and seek are opposed to EVs and are opposed to making the changes that will have to be made in order to have effective EV deployment. Now, this is encouraging. Will an EV be your next vehicle? Looks like a lot of folks are thinking they're going to head in that direction. That's great. But on the other hand, do you request an EV when you rent a car? Most of us don't. Again, a telling point. If you don't drive an EV, why not? Okay? That's the next question. We got a whole range of answers. I want to drive an EV, but I already have a good car. Gets decent gas mileage. My next car will be an EV. Now, will it be now, next year, 5 years, 10 years? That's an issue. Oh, they're too expensive. Short range. Environmental, there's a lot of articles, and I'll cite some later on, that there's actually environmental and wildlife, I can't pronounce that word, degrading from lithium mining and processing. Not to say that couldn't be true, but is that, in the larger scheme of things, how should that be weighed? Well, I just don't purchase new cars. I still have my car, pretty new. I can't charge at home in my apartment complex. A lot of good reasons. Are they good enough? Okay, next question. In your opinion, what % of Nevadans should be driving EVs in 2025? Okay, well, that's encouraging. We're thinking we should really ramp up. Of course, in order to do that, it's going to require a personal commitment from a lot of different people to purchase these vehicles, and it's going to require a lot of change by a lot of people and organizations who might not be the best at change. So I thought, okay, well, let's try to figure out how hard is this going to be. So I did some research, and Wikipedia is our friend, right? The first practical EVs, as I said, were in the late 1800s. EVs broke the speed barrier of that time in 1899. EVs were the fastest vehicles on the road in 1899. The Brits used electric trams and trains in the 1890s. Then in this country, they refer to as the golden age of EVs in this country, early 1900s. Also in London, there were already electric cabs in London in the early 1900s. And it's fascinating to read some of this history, and I encourage people to do that because you see it's very fun to see some of the same points made about EVs over 100 years ago that we're starting to see in EV marketing campaigns today. They're great as city cars. Short distances, you understand at this point in time, a lot of America was not yet electrified, right? I mean, there were a lot of areas where you couldn't, it was hard to charge because you had to figure out, do we actually have electricity in the neighborhood? A lot of people still had gas lighting. Very different time. And even so, people liked them. They didn't have the vibration, the smell, or the noise of gasoline cars. And I love this. They were called favored as women's cars for their ease of operation because you didn't have to crank them. My particular EV, and I don't want to talk about what it is, but it is actually a vehicle that every woman I know who gets into this vehicle loves it. Whether it's my Aunt Joan, or whether it's my friend Renee who lives in the Bay Area, or my friend Diane down the street, we get into this car and all of us have the same reaction to it. I want this car. And then we go around and we look at all the other cars, including some other EVs, and none of them appeal to us like this one particular vehicle does. I don't know what it is about the vehicle, but it was funny because of that, it was funny to see that even way back when the EV of choice was regarded as a women's car. As I mentioned, acceptance of electric cars was initially hampered by a lack of power infrastructure. Does this ring a bell with those of us who are thinking about charging stations? But as 1912, a lot of homes are wired for electricity. All of a sudden, the cars get to be much more powerful. Then you could see there was a time when cars were actually powered by steam, a lot of them, almost as many by electricity, and many fewer by gasoline. There was an exchangeable battery service proposed as early as 1896. And Hartford Electrics covered more than 6 million miles between 1910 and 1924. I love this next photo. The first Porsche ever was an electric car. Isn't that a wonderful thing? I just think of how it fit in the era. This is Art Nouveau, Art Deco, just right out there in a car. And that was actually offered in the marketplace. Given all that wonderful opportunity and efficiency and ease of operation and beautiful aesthetics, why have we been driving cars with internal combustion engines for the past 90 years? Well, improved roads increased everybody's driving range. People wanted to go further. There was no charging infrastructure. And oh my goodness, worldwide discoveries of large petroleum reserves. Gas cars became easier to operate. You didn't need to have the crank anymore. Even the ladies could manage. And then Henry Ford came along with mass production, which was not utilized as a technology for manufacturing electric cars. So there were very good reasons. Some of these reasons are still with us. And so part of my talk today is this basic point of life that we all know. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And we hope it doesn't happen here. We need to understand not everyone shares the goals of transportation electrification. Here's a quote from Barron's from last month. The electric car is happening already, but it only has a small slice of the market. Electric cars benefit from subsidies. Many people think EVs only can live in the market if they are subsidized. Then they're vulnerable, right? I think consumers have shown their preference for technology that's certain, and that is internal combustion engines. EVs will continue to grow, but I believe vehicles running on liquid fuels will clearly be the lowest cost, apologize for the typo, form of transportation for the next 40 years. That's kind of grim. More current articles. Stop spending taxpayer money on EVs. It's time to pull the plug on these subsidies. Government should not take a role in supporting EVs. It's time to let these companies and these EVs survive on their own. And I don't know if you folks read car magazines, but you can even see it throughout the our car culture. You read reviews of EVs in something like Car and Driver, any of the many different magazines in the car industry that review EVs. The things that those of us who love the EVs value highly are not addressed at all. And the things that, people who want to either have very large pickup trucks or sports cars are valued very highly. The criteria are different and what's applied to the different types of vehicles. EVs are dangerous because they're too quiet. We've got to keep them off the roads. So we have to understand, and it's hard to accept because I could see some folks, even in this group, are a little uncomfortable with being confronted with this, but will we repeat the past when EVs lost, or are we going to learn from it? And because many of the factors that caused EVs to fail in the market 100 years ago are still present today. Are current EV advocates going to be able to make the changes needed to support healthy growth of the industry? And what's that going to take? So what do you need to know to do what you really want to do? Well, what are your goals? And I want folks to really think about going through the exercise of how do you know what your goals are? You may think you have certain very high-level goals in terms of the environment, but specifically, what are your goals? Who shares your goals? Who are your allies? And then start to really effectively, and a lot of folks in this room have already devoted years on meeting with their allies, doing the work of negotiating about what are the real goals, what are the priorities, who gets to do their highest priority thing first. But I strongly recommend, based on a number of experiences I've had, that it's important as you come together as a group to actually do the painful work of sitting down, negotiating, and writing out a set of common goals. One sheet of paper, 3, 4, 5 objectives, everybody buys in, this is what we're going to do, and even if it's just, this is what we're going to do this week, but that everyone that you're working with is on the same page. is there will be folks who will not be working with you. Identify what has to change to achieve your goals and realize that change is always expensive, hard, and tends to take a lot more resources than anybody expects in advance. As we all know, the legislative session's starting. Actually read the applicable laws. Force yourself to sit down with whoever you have who's available to you and actually say, okay, what sections of the NRS and the NAC need to change? And actually work your way through it as a group. What does this word mean? Why do we have to change this? Why do we have to change this particular verb or noun or adjective? Why do we need to actually think about, I'm not a lawyer, you know.
And Sarah, you look to me.
It's back. Okay. So, you know, it's interesting. Somehow I killed the mic when I'm talking about a painful process. But for many people, reading statutes is not your favorite thing. But until you actually do that homework of reading the statute, understanding it, trying different ways to change it, you won't really be able to effectively build the bridge to the legislators and the regulators and other decision makers who need to really understand what your needs are, but they need to understand it in their terms. So read the law, make sure you understand the law, and then understand what has to change for you to get what you get. Next thing is figure out who is it who can give you what you want. Is it a legislator? Is it a regulator? Is it somebody entirely different? And always, I didn't put this on the slide, but just, these things are always more complicated than we wish they were. So every time we make one change, there's another change that has to be made, and then another change needs to be made, and then, oh my goodness, somebody has to build something, and then somebody's budget has to change, and then somebody has to hire somebody, and then somebody has to document it, all of which adds time to the process. And just hope that that doesn't discourage anybody. So in terms of setting goals, my one thought is just be very specific. What do you really want to do? And these are just a couple of ideas. Are you trying to cut your cost of living by buying less gas? Do you have some social goals? Are you trying to reduce Nevadans' use of fossil fuels by a certain percent, by a certain year? What amount? How soon? Are you trying, do you just want to be able to drive your EV more places? You know, the electric highway's a start, but it doesn't go a lot of places. And where do you want to go? You know, if you aren't buying it because of range anxiety, where do you want to go? Where do you need the charging stations? And oh my goodness, what kind of amenities do you need to have near charging stations? Like, do you need to make sure that we come up with an approach in Nevada where people can buy something to eat every place where they're going to be using a supercharger? Maybe so. You know, it's a whole different development concept than just putting a number of charges in isolated places. Are you are you focused on economic development? Are you focused on electrifying buses and paratransit in dense urban areas? Are you trying to really focus on the automakers? And if so, how would that work? I'm personally very discouraged because the auto I love so much is being discontinued by its manufacturer. They say it's because they can't sell as many of these vehicles as they sell of the pickup trucks. On the other hand, they don't market them. I was actually told by 2 different manufacturers, if you want to buy one of those in a light color, why don't you drive over to California or up to Oregon and get one there? Isn't that an interesting approach to selling cars? Not to mention the fact that nobody, with the exception of one bright young man in North Las Vegas, none of the folks in the showrooms knew anything about EVs. Okay, who shares your goals? Very important. One of the hardest things about this is that not only it requires additional research, we can't just talk to the people we already know, we have to talk to the people we don't know. Take on a personal duty to reach out to people who may be allies, tell them what you want, listen to what they want, but also working with folks who have goals that are different from yours, but compatible with them. Figure out who are really the movers and shakers who support your goals and who are the, the chit-chatters. Be prepared to learn and compromise. As I mentioned, I'm a big believer in negotiating and writing out your shared goals. Meet with your allies early and often. It's not going to be easy for people to agree, so when you can agree with each other, focus on capturing that win. Write it down, share it with each other, and share it with everybody else, but be prepared to modify your goals as group members change in response to external developments. Write down each new set of goals, share them with each other, and just keep on repeating this process. It may take 1 year, it may take one legislative session, but more likely you need to have a strategy which is, this is session 1, this is session 2, this is session 3. I worked on the Hoover Power contracts. We came up with a very good outcome. Nevada got a 50-year contract for Hoover Power at very good prices. It took us 10 years. So don't be surprised if this is also a journey. This is not a destination. This is a big journey. Know as much as you can about what you want, the obstacle you face, what needs to be done. Again, if you want to change laws, be sure you're reading them, specify what you want, look for wins for the legislators and their allies, as well as for opponents. So if you identify what your opponents want, they need to get something too. Figure out how they can get something while you get something. If you want to change corporate behavior, understand which specific corporation or group of corporations and which specific behaviors you're seeking to change. Specify the changes you need and look for a win for the corporation. What does the corporation want? And what do they get out of doing what you want? So figure out who can give you what you want. What entities have the power to determine whether your transportation electrification goals are going to be met by 2030? Is it the Nevada State Legislature? Is it Nevada local governments and regional organizations like the RTCs? Do we have to go to Congress? Is there something the PUC can do? How about electric utilities? What role do they play? How do you work with electric utilities? Are there other regulated entities that are involved? Automobile manufacturers, battery manufacturers, even manufacturers of the surface street infrastructure products. Everybody who wants to sell something into this market has a stake in us moving forward. Get to know who they are. They may be able to help. Understand the opposition. What does your opposition want, and why do they want it? What are they willing to give you in order to get what they want? Why do they want what they want? Is there anything you could do to help them get what they want? Well, to incent them to give you what, or help you get what you want. Don't hesitate to talk with the people who disagree with you if they're willing to. So that's just a quick introduction. I'd love to talk to folks on breaks and do a little brainstorming, and I hope that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And you bring up a really good point, is that we do have some of the conference rooms available down here, as well as a room upstairs that's open. So a great opportunity to do sidebars. Before I call up our next panel, which I keep seeing them disappear in and out of the room, I just wanted to announce that there are 2 vehicles parked in the EV-only parking section. And I don't believe that Infiniti or Mercedes makes electric vehicles yet. I know Mercedes is on their way. If you don't mind, that is reserved parking, and it may be somebody else in the building. So, and you can discreetly walk out when I'm done talking, and I won't pick on you. The next transition we're going to move into now is a series of panels. And these panels will consist of short presentations, about 5 minutes, and then moving into a discussion, more of a dialogue. And so before I get started, I'd like to introduce and invite up our moderator for the next panel, Assemblywoman Sarah Peters. She represents AD 24, Assembly District 24, which are we in? We're nested right now here in Assembly District 24. Sarah is a project manager at McGinnis & Associates Environmental, a local firm specializing in environmental science, engineering, interagency project leadership, where she works to ensure our water and other resources are protected. Sarah is a native Nevadan and is a working mom with 3 children, Isabel, Cass, and Rose. I'd like to welcome up Assemblywoman Sarah Peters, and this will be her first session.
Thank you, Rebecca. This is really exciting. It's so exciting to be here and to see so many folks interested in these issues. I'm going to just jump in. We have presentations on this panel from 3 environmental professionals that are all concerned with human health and environment and the environment and the impact that pollution has on those issues. We're here to talk about those and the benefits of advancing EV technologies on our communities. So I'd like to introduce our panel. We have, to not just discuss necessarily structure of this, do you want all 3 of them up now? Okay. First I have Daniel Inoue. Daniel is currently manages the planning and monitoring branches of the Washoe County Air Quality Management Division. The AQMD is responsible for ensuring that our air meets federal standards and is healthy to breathe here in Washoe County. He previously worked in the planning and enforcement branches of the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District in Southern California. Daniel earned his bachelor's degree in geography from Fresno State and a master's degree in land use planning from the University of Nevada. You want to come on up? And then I'm going to introduce our other 2 as well, and we'll go through the panel and have them do their quick 5-minute presentations. Matt Frommer, thank you. Matt Frommer is a senior transportation associate for the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, where he focuses on electric vehicle policy and EV grid integration. Matt received a Master's of Environmental Science in Sustainable Planning and Management from the University of Colorado in 2017. He focused on his graduate studies on the electrification of ride-share fleets and the expansion of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Colorado. Matt completed a capstone project with Rocky Mountain Institute's Mobility Transportation Team before joining SWEEP. Come on up, Matt. And Rudy Zamora was born in Mexico and raised in Las Vegas and is the program director of CHISPA Nevada's program since 2015. CHISPA is a project of the League of Conservation Voters that is one of the nation's only environmental programs focused on community organizing that builds the capacity of Latino families to influence policymakers and pressure polluters to protect community rights to a clean and healthy environment. CHISPA is currently focused on their Clean Buses for Healthy Ninos campaign that is building pressure to use VW settlement funds to convert diesel school bus fleets to all-electric school buses. Before joining CHISPA, Rudy worked for Battle Born Progress, and nonprofit communications firms supporting a wide variety of progressive issues. And this is particularly close to my heart. I think socioeconomic and environmental justice issues are one of the biggest stages we have for pushing EV technology. Personal opinion on that one. So thank you so much, panel. I appreciate you all being here. I'm going to pass the mic off to Daniel to go ahead and start his presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very pleased to be here. Very excited to see the diversity of this crowd. So I think this will be a very, very good forum here. So I'm here to give you a perspective on the electric vehicles as far as the health district goes. So here is a summary of the air quality standards that the Environmental Protection Agency sets out. It's for 6 different criteria pollutants. Locally, we are most concerned with ozone. To give you some perspective, we're at 100% of the standards, so we have no wiggle room. So as we grow, we need to grow smartly and cleanly as well. Oop, it didn't come out like the way it was supposed to, but basically the takeaways from this is that you can see that the air quality standards have strengthened over the years as EPA finds more research. They find that lower levels of air pollution are causing harm. And the other thing to note is the ozone trend. You can see, if you notice, the increase and then the decrease. That decrease relates to the recession, and you can relate other things to the economy as well as vehicle miles traveled and other things that increase pollution. So you can see the increase and then the recession hitting, and then we also see growth through the continued period here. So sources of ozone, it's mostly a combination of nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and sunlight. Transportation is responsible for most of the ozone precursors. You can see the on-road portion comprises more than half of the nitrogen oxides. And also the non-road mobile, those do include transportation sectors such as air and rail as well. So you can see that transportation has a big impact on ozone concentrations. So how did we get to 100% of the standard? Well, it's decades of business as usual growth, meaning that we just meet the minimum standards, we meet codes, and current air quality initiatives at the state and local level and federal level as well. And some of those state initiatives or state strategies would be like our smog check program that's done quite a bit to improve our air quality. At the federal level, we have things like the Clean Power Plan and CAFE standards, but there's some problems there because those can be relaxed and it can jeopardize our attainment status as well. So moving forward, what's the health district doing? We're taking our 70 parts per million or 70 parts per billion and moving forward with our Ozone Advance program. Ozone Advance is a voluntary program. It relies on partnerships with many of the groups in this forum today. They're voluntary strategies to reduce vehicle miles traveled and vehicle trips. So the cleanest trip from vehicles is the one that's not taken. Electric vehicles are like icing on the cake. So when we reduce the vehicle miles traveled, vehicle trips, we can make those, the remaining trips very clean. So again, that is icing on the cake. And as far as the categories go, it's technology, behavior, and the built environment. These all play a part in our ozone levels as well. Electric vehicles do fit into the technology category. So I'd like to highlight one of our strong partnerships we have with the City of Reno. They have committed to making air quality and sustainability one of their top priorities for last year and I believe at least for the last couple of years as well. So Reno has this top-down commitment for sustainability, air quality, and electric vehicles fit right into that category as well. So moving forward, if we don't meet these air quality standards, then after a number of years, some of these things will happen locally. We'll have poor air quality, that's kind of a given. On the public health side, we'll see higher rates of chronic diseases. And on top of that, those chronic diseases can become worse. But the one that maybe might resonate most is the economic health of our area. Growth can occur, but it needs to occur in a clean and organized way. That could mean emission offsets, could mean new pollution control or more pollution control strategies for new businesses. Federal government could come in and basically take over our program. But also, I think what sticks out is that adjacent counties such as Lyon County, Story County, might be more attractive for businesses to grow and to expand or even come into this area. And taking it to a more regional level, other states may become more attractive as well for these businesses. So that's a quick summary on the Health District's perspective on electric vehicles and how they can help us become a healthy community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Do we want to push some of these over to the side so we have a couple seats for folks? Okay. Once we get seating arrangements, I'm great. Thank you. I think we have enough seats over there that we can all move on. Great. And I'm going to pass the mic off to Matt, and I hope everyone enjoys your presentation as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dan. So my name is Matt Fromer, and I work with the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. And we do transportation policy and electric vehicle work in the Southwest. Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada, states that I work in. And today I'm going to talk about EVs in Nevada and the emissions benefits. So first, to take a step back and just talk a little about the technology, because there's a lot of confusion about EVs, plug-in hybrids. So we talk about EVs, these are the two technologies we're talking about. It's battery electric vehicles, which have an all-electric motor, so 100% of the power is from electricity. And then we have plug-in hybrid electrics, which has both an electric motor and a gasoline engine. Typically, the plug-in hybrid electric will have between 15 and 40 miles of range on the electricity, and then it'll switch over to gas. And these are vehicles like the Toyota Prius Prime. And so one question I get a lot is, are electric vehicles really that much better for the environment? Are they that much cleaner than a gas car? And the answer is yes. In all 50 states and all electric utility areas in the US today, EVs are cleaner. They're particularly cleaner in Nevada, though. And this is just a look at the electricity grid mix in a few different countries and then Nevada. The black is the percentage of coal on that grid. So in Nevada, we've been able to actually reduce that percentage from about 46% coal in 2005 to 5% today. And so major props to the utility, the PUC, for making that transition from fossil fuels and toward renewables. When we look at criteria pollutants, there's the big six: VOCs, NOx, particulate matter, SOx, carbon monoxide. And this just compares both a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and a battery electric vehicle to the average gas vehicle. We could see emissions reductions in all 6 of those categories. And just speaking personally, I do this analysis across the Southwest, and this is the only state where this is true, because we have such a clean grid here. In Colorado, for example, there aren't emissions benefits for SOx in particular because like 40% coal on the grid. So there's a particular opportunity here to leverage the success of the electricity sector in decarbonizing and do the same for transportation. Oh, look at that. Fancy. Dan talked a little bit about Washoe County and the air quality challenges here. I also want to mention in Clark County, who got an F grade for smog in 2016. According to the American Lung Association, it's the 15th most polluted county in the U.S. for smog. And smog is a combination of VOCs and NOx that form ground level ozone, which is harmful for our lungs. And this disproportionately affects low-income communities that are often most impacted by highway pollution. So again, EVs have zero tailpipe emissions, nothing's coming out of the car. It's all transferred to the point source of the power generation, which is the power plant. And in Nevada's case, the only coal plant left is North Valmy, which is more than 200 miles from any urban centers. There's particular benefits there. Then to talk about the climate benefits and greenhouse gas emissions reductions, the transportation sector is now the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions. It recently surpassed the electricity sector. It's partially because of great advances in decarbonization of electricity. We're transitioning toward renewables and things like energy efficiency programs in electricity. But also in transportation, we're driving bigger cars that have lower fuel efficiency, and the lower price of gas is encouraging us all to drive more. So total vehicle miles traveled is increasing over time. And so this is particular to Nevada. 41% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. So one way to kind of visualize this is that driving an EV today in Nevada is like driving a gas car that gets 101 miles per gallon from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. And that car, I mean, the beauty of this is that that car actually gets cleaner over time as we continue to transition toward renewables. So in 2030, if we did pass a 50% RPS in the state and source 50% of our energy from renewables, that same EV that you bought today would be like driving a car that gets 207 miles per gallon. And so unlike a gas car, it's like where the fuel efficiency is fixed at point of sale, it actually gets cleaner over time. And lastly, I want to talk about some of the grid benefits. Electric vehicles are what's known as a flexible load because they're parked 95% of the time, highly inefficient use of an asset. But Because of this, we can sort of manage the charging and line it up to increase grid efficiency at times when the grid is underutilized. And there's a particular advantage here for renewables, which are oftentimes variable in generation. The sun doesn't always shine like today. The wind isn't always blowing, but we can use things like pricing signals to time up EV charging with solar to maximize that generation and reduce things like curtailment. That's all I have, so thanks for listening.
Thank you, Matt. That was wonderful. Next, we have Rudy. Rudy's going to go ahead and come up here. And then following this, we'll go into some discussion and questions.
Awesome. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I am not the policy side. We are the community organizing component. So we are the ones that are taking all the research that Dan and Matt are doing and implementing it and passing it on to the community. Chispa, Nevada, like Assemblywoman Peters mentioned, is the community organizing group, a program of the League of Conservation Voters. And we have been organizing for the last year and a half, our campaign called Clean Buses for Healthy Niños, where we are trying to have school districts transition diesel engine school buses into 100% electric school buses. That is widely supported by our communities. It's widely supported by some school districts. Unfortunately, right now, the only thing stopping us is the cost of said vehicle. With that said, there's a health benefit to getting rid of these diesel chugging machines. In Nevada, we have 1 in every 12 students suffer from asthma, and we've noticed that asthma is the largest reason why students are missing school. So we're making a correlation, we're making a connection with everything to help get some of the policy and some of the research that Matt and Dan are doing to the community, and we're also hoping to start working with partners to find a way to bring these buses into our communities and into the state. That's pretty much what I have.
All right, round of applause for our presenters. Oh, now I'm going to go ahead and shift you guys up here so we can be in panel format. I think we have a couple of mics to pass around. So I think that these folks address some really significant issues in our state, and I think we all probably have questions related to that. So we're going to do, what do I have, 20 minutes? Ish. Of questions, and I see one popping up here. So just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll give you a nod that I've seen you, and we'll start it up. It's David.
Thanks, Madam Assembly Member. So I drive a 15-year-old diesel Volkswagen when particulate and other air emissions were honest, and they just admitted they did it. So, modeled after other governments, when will the local air district or the state of Nevada offer me a bounty to retire my adequately working diesel Volkswagen?
I think that one's for me here. Yeah, so we appreciate that you do keep that vehicle running and get some good mileage out of that. They are very dirty and very inefficient compared to today's vehicles. Occasionally there will be some incentives to replace those. I think on the electric vehicle side there were some federal tax credits locally, and this is kind of our challenge that ties in with our Ozone Advanced program. It's a voluntary program, so these things are things that we advocate for and encourage, but we don't have the teeth to do it as basically attaining the ozone standard. So ironically, when we are a non-attainment area, we do have more teeth and more options to address programs or vehicles like that. So before we do that, we're trying to do this on the front end. And again, it's that voluntary partnership and programs that is our local challenge. So Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So at this time, locally, and I believe statewide, there is not anything available. Again, it's very challenging it may be more challenging to not violate the ozone standard than it is to violate it and get back into attainment. So again, it relies on those voluntary partnerships that we have with everybody in the room here.
And it might be worth saving that question for Senator Brooks when he's here a little later.
Mr. Inouye, for you again. You say that we are on the verge of non-attainment for air quality here in the county. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What happens when we move into non-attainment?
When we go into non-attainment, it basically starts the clock with the federal government, with EPA. We do have a certain amount of time to achieve or meet those standards. If we don't meet those standards, then there's a progressive, basically like progressive discipline. If we don't meet the standard within the first time period, then we get bumped in up to a more or a higher level of non-attainment, which requires additional control measures and strategies. Taking that out to continued non-attainment, that's where the last slide that I had that talked about, okay, our air is not healthy to breathe, and other geographic areas may become more attractive for new and expanding businesses. So not meeting the standard and then becoming a non-attainment area is the first step of all these air quality control strategies.
Is this the first time that Washoe County's been out of attainment or been on the verge of out of attainment?
Well, going back to the, I believe, 1979 ozone standard, we were a non-attainment area for the 1979 standard. In one of my charts, it showed how the standards have evolved and basically become more strengthened. So after the 1997 standard was adopted and promulgated, the 79 standard dropped off. So from the 1997, 2008, and 2015 standard, we have been meeting those levels there. As a side note, we were a non-attainment area for carbon monoxide and PM10, and that's been a wintertime problem, not as much related to transportation as ozone is in the summertime.
This is also for Dan. Hey, Dan. Hey, you know, the city worked with UNR and we did an environmental justice assessment using EPA's. They've got an assessment tool, and the environmental justice conditions in our region basically correlate with the 395 and the I-80 corridors and our air quality and particulate impacts. The EPA is a huge leader on environmental justice and equity issues. If we are in non-attainment, are we then required to also assess the environmental justice issues related to the non-attainment and implement programs that address that?
The federal air quality standards apply to the region. It doesn't take into account environmental justice. So for the air quality standards, the environmental justice doesn't come into play, but our solutions will address or account for or acknowledge the environmental justice impacts. So yes, in the areas where we see higher air pollution, there are some disadvantages there, disadvantaged areas. Currently, the health district is concentrating on the geographic area of 89502 zip code, which includes the air quality component, but environmental justice and social justice is becoming more and more more in the discussion for these solutions.
Daniel, I wanted to say thank you to the health district for the wood burning stove program that you guys have implemented that has helped to clear up our winter air, and it has created a lot of progressive measures to start us out. And what I wanted to ask, and I don't know who could answer this best, is we have a huge economy for outdoor recreation, and I would imagine that air quality, is something that affects that. Have we been able to quantify what our economic stimulus for outdoor recreation is and how it impacts that bit of our state's economy.
I can't totally answer that. Those studies may have been done, but not through the health district or the air quality management agency. There may be some partners within here that may have better estimates of that.
Question for Matt. You mentioned trying to align the charging with the solar, but right now the daytime is when they don't want us charging our cars on the grid. So when do you see that changing? Because it affects, I'm from the city of Reno, and we're trying to figure out how many charging stations to put in, and I'm wrestling with, do I encourage people to charge during the day? It seems counterproductive to what everyone's told me in the past, where you want to be charging when the grid's not burdened.
Yeah, I think that example is kind of looking ahead, and some of the studies we've seen in Arizona and California where they have a lot of excess solar on the grid already. I don't know if we're at that point quite yet in Nevada, but I think that the starting point is to increase grid efficiency overall with the current assets. And right now, the grid is most underutilized in the middle of the night. We're all sleeping and no one's using any electricity. So we've seen with current time of use rates is they encourage charging in the middle of the night with certain time of use programs that could be explored by NV Energy and others. Yeah, I think looking out, projecting the future of integrating renewables and maximizing potential.
I had a couple questions up here. Okay.
And I would just note that the mic is fluctuating so that other people in other rooms aren't hearing it. So we need to make sure for our people that try and use a mic that's getting to both.
Okay.
So I think that one is working correctly.
Is this one working? There we go.
I can hear you very well.
As Daniel and others can answer this as well, what is your feedback from the fleets that are under your control or compliance on what the barriers are to reducing their carbon reduction? You have your EPA Ozone Advance program that's voluntary, but how do you get people to join outside of compliance issues?
Yeah, that is the big question because it is voluntary. We do what we can to encourage. What seems to be the biggest impact or the biggest message is the economic side. So when we can help pencil it out to show that it will be an economic benefit or a financial benefit for that company is, I think, the message that works the best. It is hard to sometimes get over that hump with those initial costs, but sending the financial benefit is the strongest message to get that out there. We've seen mixed results with the fleet turnover. One of the things that on the transportation side, indirectly with the ground support equipment at the airports, not only Reno Tahoe, but McCarran just received or will be receiving a big chunk of money that we'll be hearing about later on through the VW mitigation program to transform that ground support equipment fleet from the older, dirtier diesels to basically electric. So is I think what that goal was for those funds was to transform those fleets, and I think that's going to be a good example that we can point back to in the future.
Really exciting. Did you have a question?
Is Nevada Energy looking at other renewables other than electric?
So, such as, hydrogen.
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure. We have the brains in this panel for that question. Good question, though. I have one back here, and then I'll come back up here.
I would say there's a lot of good research out there on alternative fuels like biofuel, hydrogen fuel cell, electric vehicles. I think EVs have kind of emerged as the most promising solution because the cost of lithium-ion batteries has come down so quickly, similar to what we've seen with solar PV. It's just coming down, 80% in the last 9-10 years. Whereas we haven't quite seen that with hydrogen fuel cell or biofuels.
And where are those batteries go?
Really good question.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah. The question was, where do the batteries go once we're done using them? I know there's a lot of research being done right now about recycling batteries, particularly for Tesla, either putting them into new vehicles or using them as stationary storage to back up things like charging stations and reduce risk from demand charges, things like that.
So question for Rudy. I think electric school buses are super exciting because they bring electric technology to kids and their parents, a lot of folks who may not have thought about any of this. I just want to throw back to you any examples of school districts that are acquiring buses, and on the charging infrastructure, are the utilities installing that, or are they taking outside funding to install that piece?
So right now we've seen that there's interest, but like I mentioned earlier, the buses are a little too expensive for some of our school districts. And the way our education system is funded now, we can't really put teachers over buses. So we have to work with school districts, we have to work with the state to ensure that our education is funded correctly so that we can move forward and ensure that our kids are on clean transportation. But this is one of those things that we can't ask for one and not the other. We have to work hand in hand with the education system and ensure that our students are being educated and have a high quality education, and at the same time that they're being transported in clean vehicles. But right now, we had a couple school districts apply for some of the VW money. In their proposals, there's nothing specifically that says they're going from diesel to electric. They're replacing diesel buses. That's all that the proposal says. So that could mean they're transitioning out some of the old diesel buses and bringing in biodiesel or some of the cleaner diesel buses, which is not ideal because we want that electric school bus on the road. So that's still work that we're working on, and we're trying to find solutions for that outside of the Volkswagen Settlement Fund.
I'm curious if each of you see EVs as a solution to a problem that you're interested in, whether it's pollution generally, greenhouse gases, or disproportionately affected communities. Where do you think we should start? Is it general consumer adoption? Is it commercial fleets, public fleets, electric buses? Where do you think, given that right now we're only at 1 or 2% in the state, where do we begin?
I'll kick that one off. I think we need to begin with an education piece. A lot of our communities don't understand what electric vehicles are. They hear the term electric vehicle and they think Tesla. The first thing in their mind is there's no way in hell I can afford a Tesla. There's 43 different models by 20 different manufacturers out there. So it's an education piece that we need to let them know that there's cheaper choices out there. There's the Chevy Volt, there's other options that they can go in, and then we can talk about the financial money they're going to get back on the savings from gas every year, on maintenance of the vehicle. So I think it starts in the community with an education piece, and then putting the buses out, whether it's at a school level, whether it's at a city level. You guys have a really awesome RTC electric bus out here. So folks are getting to see that bus around town, and that raises flags, and then they start doing their own research. But I think starting within the community and doing that education piece.
Well said, Rudy. I think it's all of the above. The technology's here for cars, it's here for buses. I honestly didn't think it'd be here for buses for a while, but according to Bloomberg, they're saying half of the U.S. bus fleets will be electric buses by 2025. So we're gonna have more electric buses, or a higher percentage of electric buses than cars by 2025. It's moving very quickly, just because they're such high utilization vehicles and the fuel savings are so high. So I'd also think about applications like rideshare. We've seen Uber and Lyft growing exponentially year over year. Things like autonomous vehicles around the corner. So electrifying those are high mileage vehicles, and if they're gas powered, they could represent 9-10 times the amount of emissions. So we want those to be electric.
Okay, from the health district perspective, we're taking a step back from that and trying to reduce the vehicle miles traveled from the get-go. So we're working with our community development departments to help design or help our community grow so we have less dependence on the vehicle. And as I mentioned before, electric vehicles are just the icing on the cake. So our first goal is to reduce vehicle miles traveled and vehicle trips But then also to make electric vehicles more financially, a better financial choice for the public in the future, we need things like to have our new construction be EV charging capable or EV charging ready. Just right off the bat, if you were to retrofit existing construction, that's an extra, I don't know the exact dollars, but maybe $1,000 or more toward the price of somebody wanting to charge at home. So just incorporating those things early on or basically during the construction phase of a new house or building or parking lot is pennies on the dollar to retrofit. So again, we're taking the step back, reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing trips, and then electric vehicles has icing on the cake.
I think that answer, that response actually weaves really nicely into this last question that I have for you all. We see how much policy interrelates, right? We have a web of ideas and different applications that are coming up to address the need to move away from fossil, high-polluting fuels, right? For you guys, in the positions that you're in, how do you see partnerships working? Do you have dream partnerships with different organizations or entities that you'd like to help develop? And who would those include, and what would those look like?
Guess I'm kicking it off again. Ideal partnerships for us would be the school districts, Washoe County School District, Clark County School District, and then the other 15 school districts across the state of Nevada, because oftentimes we forget about our rural partners and our rural communities. Continuing partnerships not only with the school districts, but with the PUC and with legislators. I think this is something that can be put into law, not right away, but slowly as we continue having conversations around electric vehicles, electric transportation in general. So our ideal partnership would be with the school districts and the PUC.
That's a great question. I think partnerships with the utility offers the most potential. This is a huge opportunity for utilities to sell more electricity through electric vehicles. And if done wisely, they can also increase the grid efficiency, reduce electricity rates for all of us. We're seeing this happening all over the country, including with NV Energy here, so somewhat of a pioneer there, which is great. I'd also encourage partnerships with the companies like Uber and Lyft. They have big sustainability goals. States like California are actually requiring them to decarbonize over a period of time to go toward 100% electric. And I would encourage Nevada to pursue those partnerships as well.
From the health district perspective, I think our best partnerships or strongest partnerships might be here at the local level, especially those that work with the built environment. So again, as new construction is developed or constructed, we need to be ready for that future technology. And again, our first goal is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, trips. So if you have, like this gentleman had this old diesel VW vehicle, if he doesn't have to drive it, that's the cleanest vehicle that we can have. So giving him the opportunities to avoid using that and finding yeah, there you go, perfect. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the strengths of our Ozone Advanced program is that it makes other existing programs even stronger. So for instance, like Reno's master plan, Ozone Advanced makes their plan even stronger. The bike and pedestrian plan that RTC has, our Ozone Advanced plan makes it even stronger. So it's just leveraging those partnerships to work toward our goal of a healthy community.
Thank you so much, you guys. A round of applause for our panel. And I think they'll be sticking around during breaks, so if you have additional questions or comments, find our folks at that point.
And now we begin the break, and we'll be starting again promptly at 10:35. environmental conservation. He also helped register thousands of students to vote and encouraged more people to participate in the civic process. For his work, Howard was recognized as a local hero by City Life magazine, Activist of the Year by Vegas 7, and received a 2018 Green Award. He owns and operates a small PR firm and lives near downtown Las Vegas. Please welcome Assemblyman Howard Watts.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. All right, so our next panel is going to be on the economic benefits of electric transportation. So we're going to have 3 panelists come up and give presentations. I'm going to call them up one by one, and we'll go through each of their presentations. Then I'll ask a couple of questions to get the discussion started, and we'll open it up to the audience for questions that you have. So first up, I'm going to have Sarah Forney come up. She is a senior manager for clean vehicles at Ceres. Sarah engages with investors and companies to increase corporate uptake of electric vehicles and advance EV charging infrastructure and deployment in the United States. Prior to joining Ceres, Sarah worked for the U.S. Department of Transportation's Volpe Center, where she supported federal transportation projects to increase commercial deployment of alternative jet fuel, identify further on-road electrification opportunities for cities, and mitigate impacts from and improve resilience to climate change indicators in the context of U.S. transportation assets. Before moving to the greater Boston area, Sarah supported the U.S. Department of Energy's Clean Cities Program and Energy Policy Act of 1992 to reduce petroleum consumption from on-road vehicles in the U.S. and transition fleets to alternative fuels. Sarah, come on up.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. We're really excited to have you here to learn more about EVs and specifically the economic benefits of EVs. So as Assemblyman Watts said, my name is Sarah Forney, and I'm the Senior Manager for Clean Vehicles at Ceres. Ceres is a sustainability advocacy nonprofit organization, and we're based out of Boston, but we also have offices in San Francisco. And we work with companies and investors to help drive clean energy solutions throughout the economy. I specifically lead our electric vehicle work, working with companies to help them make commitments on transportation electrification. And so that's why I'm going to talk with you guys today about the business case for electric transportation. So why electric vehicles? Well, on top of the myriad climate benefits, EVs also have a strong financial case, and that business case is actually growing every single day. In fact, Bloomberg New Energy Finance estimates that EVs are going to reach upfront cost parity without subsidies with internal combustion engines, or ICEs, by 2024. And that's because battery costs are getting cheaper and cheaper every single day through technological advancements and economies of scale through increased EV demand. And it's really exciting to see that EVs are actually going to be cheaper to drive than ICEs, say by 2024, right off the lot, because they're going to be the exact same upfront purchase price, but you're also going to see those additional fuel and maintenance cost savings on top of that. Currently, battery costs are about $200 per kilowatt hour, and they're expected to fall to $70 per kilowatt hour by 2030. So that's going to be a significant drop. And so automakers can kind of choose how they're going to take advantage of those cost benefits. When the time comes, they can either make EV ranges longer, or they can also just decrease the cost of the vehicle, or kind of do a mixture of both. Range is also rapidly improving in EVs. The median EV range grew from 73 miles in model year 2011 to 125 miles in model year 2018. And that means the more electric miles you're driving, the more cost savings you're going to see. On top of that, new models are being rolled out to meet the diverse needs of fleets and consumers. So previously, kind of compact cars were the only thing that were available in an electric version, but now we're seeing compact cars to pickup trucks that are going to be coming out next model year with Rivian and Workhorse, and now Ford's announcement about the F-150 going to be electrified, and also semi-trucks. So it's really exciting to see that, you know, all the specifications of fleets can be met or will be met soon by automakers. But the EV market is also growing because of these advancements in the market. In 2018, specifically in November, EVs on the road passed the 1 million mark, And the next million is projected by 2021 by the Edison Electric Institute. Bloomberg New Energy Finance also is projecting that EVs are going to make up about 34% of US light-duty vehicle sales by 2030. They're around 1% right now, so the market's really going to be advancing through the 2020s. And EV market investment is growing from automakers. Almost every single automaker out there right now has announced that they're coming out with new electric models to meet all the needs of their clients. In terms of investments, they've announced over $300 billion in EVs globally over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's on top of current investments that are already out there. They've also announced that they're going to introduce over 30 new EV models just in the next 2 years. And they also have benefits on the larger economic scale. Ceres and MJ Bradley & Associates released a really exciting report in November 2017 that compared the costs versus the benefits of electric vehicle deployment in the US within 13 utility service territories within 7 states, and we found that by 2035, the cumulative societal benefits from EVs are going to total $10 billion under a low EV penetration scenario and $58 billion under a high EV market penetration scenario. And that's just under those 13 specific utility service territories. So imagine the economic benefits if you bring that out to a larger scale in the US. So how can you take advantage of these really exciting electrification benefits? Well, we're talking to companies about electrifying their fleets, installing retail and workplace charging stations, and also creating EV education and incentive programs for their employees to purchase or lease a new electric vehicle. So here's where I'm going to break down a little bit more of the general business case that companies and other fleets can expect to see in each of, if they make commitments in each of these areas. So fleet electrification, to start out with, offers significant emissions reduction, which is really important for companies if they've set ambitious climate goals or sustainability goals. Investors care about meeting those goals, so anything they can do to help them get there faster is good. Cost savings, as I mentioned before, EVs offer significant fuel and maintenance cost reduction. In fact, Union of Concerned Scientists estimates that you can reduce your costs by switching to an EV $800 per year per vehicle. So it's pretty significant. And also, electricity is a more stable fuel supply, and also it has more stable prices than petroleum does. Also, it's good for workforce recruitment and reputational benefits. People want to work at companies and buy products from companies that are more sustainable and care about the environment. And people don't often know about this, but they also offer more safety benefits than petroleum vehicles in that they have a traction battery that makes the vehicle have a lower center of gravity, and so it is less likely to roll over. So safety of employees is important. In terms of workplace and retail charging, it also offers significant emissions reduction potential because if you install charging stations for your employees, USDOE found that you can, or that employees are 6 times more likely to purchase or lease an EV if you have that available to them. So that reduces your Scope 3 emissions and also can earn you LEED certification points, which is great. Workforce and consumer recruitment. Say someone has an EV and they're shopping around to find a new job. If they know that this new potential job has a charging station on site, that's a huge benefit to them if they know that they can charge their vehicle while they're working, especially if they live in an apartment building where they don't have a charger at home. And also reputational benefits. A lot of companies are installing chargers at retail lots. So for example, Target. So it's really good if people can see, if customers can see that you care about the environment and you have strong sustainability programs in place. In addition, if you have retail charging stations, research has found that people stay longer in stores and buy more things. So that's always a good thing for companies to be making more money from their customers who are charging their lots. And also we're encouraging companies to develop EV education and incentive programs. I'll just mention one of those, workforce recruitment. Obviously, people would be more interested in working for a company that it's offering, say, $7,000 for you to buy a car. So there are a few companies out there that are doing that right now. So this slide shows, and this is my last slide, I know I'm going a bit over, but this slide shows a couple examples of companies taking action. Under the fleet electrification bucket, you have a few companies that are all part of the Ceres network, which is really exciting. Cliff Bar, Unilever, and IKEA have all made commitments under EV100, which Ceres is a North American partner of. It's led by the Climate Group, and under this commitment area, these companies have committed to electrify their light-duty fleets by 2030, 100% of those fleets, and also 50% of their medium-duty fleets by 2030. And there are also companies who aren't EV100 members but are making really exciting moves in the EV space. For example, UPS, obviously they have operations throughout the entire US, and so they're doing kind of pilot projects to figure out how these vehicles are going to work in their fleets and whether they can meet all of the various needs of different geographic regions. So they are going to deploy 50 e-delivery trucks in a few cities. They've pre-ordered 125 Tesla semis, and they also have a deal with Workhorse for 950 electric delivery vans. Under charging infrastructure, IKEA has committed to put charging stations at all of their locations by 2030, and Target, which didn't commit to EV100, but they're also making great moves in the charging station space. They're going to install EVSE, or electric vehicle supply equipment, to serve 600 parking spaces at over 100 sites in the next 2 years. And then also, like I mentioned, incentive programs for employees are really important, and a good example of that is Cliff Bar, which is offering $6,500 to any of their employees who purchase or lease an EV, and also National Grid has a similar program in place. So with that, I will hand it off to Cameron. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. All right. Next, we're going to be joined by Cameron Dyer. He is the Clean Energy Program Staff Attorney at Western Resource Advocates, or WRA. Cameron represents WRA in Nevada with a focus on the Nevada PUC. He advocates for policies that will reduce carbon emissions from electricity generation by decreasing reliance on fossil fuel generation, increasing production of renewable energy, and encouraging the efficient use of electricity. His current work includes advocacy in commission proceedings, addressing utility resource planning, energy efficiency programs, Nevada's renewable portfolio standard, distributed solar generation, net energy metering, and distribution voltage optimization. Cameron, please come on up.
Thank you, Howard, and thanks for letting me join you all today and be here with you. As Howard mentioned, I work with Western Resource Advocates as a staff attorney there in the Clean Energy Program. We are a group that works on preserving the West's land, air, and water, with our specific focus on greenhouse gas emission reduction through electric utility regulations, regulation work and advocacy, sorry. So I'm going to have hopefully a fairly short slide deck here today. And I have a lot of kind of numbers and graphs and stuff like that. Most of it's for illustrative purposes only. I don't want to go too far into it. We could spend all day just talking about, the numbers behind these. At a high level, some of the economic benefits of EVs, you look at some operating cost reductions for EV owners. That's pretty specific to EV owners simply because they don't have to do as much maintenance on vehicles. And as was talked about in the last panel, you get some pretty good fuel equivalent efficiency. So instead, the average, which is about 24 or 25 miles a gallon, EVs are looking somewhere around 100 to 200 in the future, hopefully as the grid gets a little more renewable. The second thing is energy cost savings. This applies to all customers of a utility. Essentially what it does is, and I hope everyone's familiar at least with a duck curve, is it's essentially the curve of generation of electricity, energy, during the day, and the peak loads and usages, where the peak loads happen in the afternoon, and then sometimes in the morning not as much, but then you have a lot of generation during the day from solar sources. And if you look at the profile of the graph, it kind of looks like a duck sitting in the water, so that's where the name duck curve comes from. Ideally, EVs would help with curtailment, as was talked about in the last panel a little bit, where you'd have solar generation peaking during the day, and then that energy could go to electric vehicles charging during the high points of the day, but then also in the evenings and nights when there's very little electric load placed on the grid, you could increase that load a little bit and charge electric vehicles during that time. And that leads to increased utilization of the existing infrastructure on the grid. So it means that existing plants, transmission lines, and all things like that can actually be run a little bit more during the nighttime, so you don't have the natural gas resources shut off. Societal benefits is kind of the third main economic benefit. And the last panel, they focused really on the environmental benefits. which included NOx, CO2, ozone, and VOC reductions. And that implicates health, environment, as well as creates some as well as supports job creation, and then the increased reduction of EV-related emissions as we get to more penetration of clean energy. So how much infrastructure is required or is expected to be required for electric vehicles? Estimates are around 3 DC fast charging chargers per 1,000 battery electric vehicles and something like 38 level 2 chargers. The level 2 chargers are both in commercial spaces and will largely, 75% will be home chargers. That helps with job creation because all of these things need to be installed and we need people who are qualified and experienced in installing them, so there's going to be a lot of opportunities there for work. One of the things that has to be looked at and is being worked on at the regulatory as well as the legislative level are time of use tariffs and managed charging to make sure that we're actually using these resources during the right times of day and not just adding to the peak loading in the evening when everyone gets home. Because we all get home, we want to turn on our air conditioning units, which increases the load demand on the grid. Then we plug in our cars, that'll increase the load. And so we'll have these kind of ratcheting situations where the grid's being taxed more than it needs to be. So time of use tariffs kind of incentivize the economics, so people don't want to go home and pay a lot more money during the 4 to 6 p.m. period at night. They'd be more happy plugging in their cars from like midnight to 9 in the morning or something like that. And then also what Sarah was saying is looking at charging stations at companies during the day when we have a lot more solar power being put in the grid. Time of use tariffs would also suggest that people can plug in while they're at work and help with curtailment there. Again, these are kind of illustrative numbers. These are some of the studies that have been done. Ceres multi-state review kind of looked at a low, moderate penetration of electric vehicles and then also a high penetration. So, fairly low, 3% of the fleet by 2025, 15% as a high end, and then that goes up to 43% by 2035. I have a study from Colorado and Arizona by MJ Bradley as well, separate from the Ceres one. And then also a sweep study looking at 26% of penetration of electric vehicles by 2030. This, I think, was in the last panel, just a quick, review. There's significant operating benefits to having an electric vehicle, and some of those are estimated to be as high as $1,200 a year, which translates to something like $11,000 to $15,000 over the life of a car. That's a fair amount of money when you start comparing internal combustion engines to EVs. Sarah had used this slide as well, which is from the Ceres multi-state report. It covers California, Georgia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And kind of the takeaway from this, the kind of illustration is that, as Sarah was mentioning, the costs are here, the benefits are here. That's about 3-to-1 ratio. It suggests that the costs are much greater than, or much less than the benefits in the long run. This is the Arizona study. I chose Arizona simply because it's a similar jurisdiction to what Nevada has. We don't have any specific studies on Nevada along these lines, but this kind of shows that these are the costs of off-peak charging. So if you look at this as in millions, so that's about $2.5 to $3 billion in costs. On the low penetration scale, you can see it's somewhere around $3.5 to $4 billion of benefits. On a higher, you're looking at somewhere around 30 billion, so maybe a 10x. It's very aspirational, but these are potentially there. Colorado, that's another state that's been very active in the EV market. We're looking around somewhere around $2 billion of costs. On a low penetration, that could be $5 billion. On a high penetration, again, we're looking at 40 to 45 billion. So potentially up to a 10x on the benefits from the costs. And then just quickly, Nevada projections, we could be seeing economic benefits of $720 million a year. The Arizona study suggested that each ratepayer in a utility, people who don't necessarily own EVs, could see benefits of up to $180 a year on their bills. So, it comes out to be about $10, $12 a month. Nevada's got a similar profile. I think the number there is about up to $180 under this scenario. And then $2.72 billion a year that would stay in Nevada's economy. This is based on the amount of money that we spend on fuel being transported in from out of state into Nevada for power generation. So if we don't do that and we keep it all local here with solar, geothermal, local renewable resources, that could be money that stays right here in the state and supports job creation as well as, you know, the economy in general. And this, I think these numbers represent about 6,000 new jobs is the anticipation for that under a penetration scenario is this, which looks at about 26% electric vehicles by 2030. These are some references, the MJ Bradley electric vehicle studies that I talked about. NV Energy has a great electric resource page, and then the EI has the conservative annual outlook for EV adoption. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cameron. All right. Last but not least, we're going to have Chris Riley come up. He leads workforce development and education programs for Tesla, focusing on Nevada's Gigafactory 1 expansion. Over the past 2 years, this team has launched programs for high school graduates to start full-time careers at Tesla, for college and university students in the state to get hands-on work experience as technicians at Gigafactory 1, and for Nevadans to learn advanced manufacturing fundamentals through partnerships with schools and the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Most recently, Chris has helped launch the first investments in a multi-year $37.5 million commitment to K-12 education from Tesla as part of the 2014 agreement to locate Gigafactory 1 in Sparks, Nevada. Prior to Tesla, Chris worked at Apple for 8 years in San Francisco, Shanghai, and London in roles across product merchandising, program management, and finance. So, Chris, welcome.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Good. Good. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. My name is Chris. I focus on workforce development and education programs for Tesla. And first, I just wanted to say thank you so much. You all the leaders in our community that are helping accelerate this effort. And that's something that's really exciting to see the energy building right here. And so I figured it'd be fun before we jump in to just play a video that Tesla recently made called Made in Nevada. And so it's a short video that'll show a little bit about what we're building here at Gigafactory 1 right in Sparks, and then jump on in. That's my DJ skills here. All right, and just before we jump into some of the pieces we're going to talk about, I just wanted to share a little bit on Tesla's mission. And if I think many of you all have been to the Gigafactory, and when you tour a Tesla facility, you see a real commonality around that mission. And it's definitely incredibly hard work, and it's incredibly rewarding, and that's why the most common thread across every level of our workforce at Tesla is that passion to help accelerate this transition to sustainable energy. And in order for Tesla's mission to be realized, we needed to think a little bit differently about our next phase of production. And so back in 2013, we set off on a 9-month site selection, looking across, I believe, 400 different sites before selecting Gigafactory 1 to be built right here in Nevada. And this facility, you'll see this is a 15.5 million square foot facility located on 3,200 acres. Doesn't look like this yet, but it is also designed to be net zero, is a really important part of this. And so this is the final rendering of what the factory will look like. This would include about 200,000 solar panels and a 70 megawatt solar array on rooftop. We will need more solar beyond that, but really thinking about net zero, not just in terms of a vehicle, but in terms of full production. Really making the facility net zero as well is something really exciting to us. And as you saw in the video, even today, just under 5 years later, we're in addition to the highest volume battery plant in the world for vehicles, we're also producing all of Model 3's electric motors, battery modules, battery packs, and electronics of the battery pack right here in Sparks, as well as all of our energy storage products. And energy storage is a huge topic for us. Us here in this room, it doesn't get as much attention outside yet, but there's projects like if you all read about the Australia project, the 100 megawatt hour battery pack, that was built on the second floor of Gigafactory in 100 days, installed and landed. And so those are really exciting projects that are happening right here. This is a shot of the factory in 2016. You'll see we were making some quick progress, but about 9 months later, there was a couple more cars on the road. So you'll see there was some change. There's a lot going on here. And then the next year, we also started adding solar on the roof. We've continued to densify inside of the facility and expand what we can do here. But again, as the video said, we're 30% built. That entire pad is 100 acres. The end of this building will be right about, where are you? Yeah, right here. So that's how early on we are in this history. And what that's added up to is, you'll see this is a photo of in December. We actually opened a pop-up delivery center within Gigafactory 1 for individuals, customers in Nevada who wanted to purchase a Tesla Model 3. In Q4, we delivered about 90,000, I think just over 90,000 vehicles, and that was almost equivalent to what we had delivered in the entire year before. So really making a significant jump in terms of our production and volume. And so we were doing deliveries right here. When we were talking about the economic benefits and the economic development side of this, we talked about the 5.4 million square foot facility. That's what we have today. 7,000 full-time employees across Tesla, across Panasonic, H&T, Vallejo, and our partners on site. Those are full-time employees today in just this short amount of time. And I think it's really worth just pausing and noting here that we're around 94% Nevadan at the facility. And we have about 2,000 people a day. Loved hearing some of the alternative commute options. Around 2,000 people a day that commute either via free shuttles, van pooling in partnership with RTC, or carpooling service. So, it's really exciting to start to see, going back to that mission, our employees are aligned. And so we see our team members making those choices as well. And $6 billion in capital investment in the facility so far. And the one piece that we were also mentioning that someone mentioned at the end was the $37.5 million commitment to education. And that was part of Tesla's agreement with the state to locate here. And we kicked off a series of initial investments in July of 2018. And on that, we're really focused on how do we help accelerate robotics and sustainability programming across our state. Thinking about future workforce, I believe, we built a high school graduate program that now around 50 to 60 students a year will start their career at Tesla as production associates. These were, that's Dylan, Hector, and Nick in March of their senior year of high school. And then that was Nick 9 months later. And these are real. And when we think about these jobs, these are in our community. And this program grew from 13 individuals the first year as a pilot to 54 individuals in that second year across 5 school districts and 15 schools. And so how do we continue to build on this? And regarding the education side, everything we do is completely open sourced. So we're much more focused on building this into other businesses as well. How do we get a scale to be thinking about 30,000 seniors that graduate Nevada high schools every year. So that's how we're thinking about the education side. And then even before that, thinking about programs like how do you create a robotics team at every single school? How do you create a mindset where robotics is also a varsity sport? Because from an employment perspective, that gets really exciting. And so you can see these are some of the photos of our team members who are in these different programs at Tesla. And yeah, thank you guys so much.
All right, thank you, Chris. And if you guys could move over here just a little bit so we can get you guys picked up on the live stream. Switch out mics, let's do it. All right.
Critical need, and so you're seeing almost a yes and strategy applied to different solutions there, and I believe there's currently a project underway for up to, I believe, 50,000 homes to have individualized energy storage via power walls, as well as connected solar, and that's all interconnected through the grid. So really starting to see communities that are doing that, it gets really exciting. And then on the sort of the disaster relief side, and being able to very quickly bring that technology to an affected area and get energy back on. That's where we're starting to see some of the most momentum there.
Yeah, I think what I'd say on the kind of vehicle to grid kind of